The sun was barely rising over the quiet neighborhood when a routine traffic stop turned into something no one saw coming. A black woman, well-dressed and calm, was pulled over by a local police officer who claimed she failed to signal a turn. What should have been a short, uneventful interaction quickly escalated. The officer, visibly impatient and showing clear bias, began raising his voice. Without giving her much chance to speak, he ordered her out of the car. Tension built fast, and the woman stayed composed, but firm. She knew her rights, and she wasn't going to be intimidated. But the officer didn't back down. In front of passing cars and curious bystanders, he crossed a line he would soon regret. This wasn't just anyone he was dealing with. The woman he assumed was powerless was actually far from it. She was the newly appointed director of the FBI, his ultimate superior, and someone with the authority to shake the very system he thought protected him. But in that moment, he didn't know. And he didn't care to ask. He only saw what he wanted to see. As onlookers began to film, the situation took a sharp turn. The woman calmly gave one warning, just one. She told him her name. She told him who she was. But instead of listening, the officer smirked, thinking she was bluffing. That's when the real story begins. What happens when someone with power, dignity, and patience is pushed too far? What happens when the truth about identity, authority, and racism collides in the middle of a street no one will ever forget? This story isn't just about one bad cop or one powerful woman. It's about the consequences of judging someone based on appearance and the reality check that comes when justice is no longer silent. Stay tuned, because the moment he realizes who she really is, everything changes. The woman stood tall, eyes locked on the officer who had just grabbed her arm. Around them, the early morning streets buzzed with whispers, phones recording, people watching. She didn't raise her voice, didn't fight back. Her calm made the moment even more intense. She repeated her name slowly, clearly, but it didn't register. Or maybe he just didn't care. He was too far into his ego, too sure he was in control. The truth is, she'd only been in town a few weeks. Transferred quietly after taking on her new role as FBI director. Her background was solid, former military, years as a special agent, now the highest-ranking official in federal law enforcement. She moved without making noise, always keeping a low profile. That morning, she was on her way to an off-the-record briefing, something confidential, something big. The officer had no idea who he was messing with, but that wasn't the shocking part. What made it worse was that he didn't even try to find out. No badge check, no ID verification, nothing. Just a quick judgment based on skin color and a license plate from out of state. He saw her expensive car and her calm voice as a threat, not a clue. And now every second ticking by was pulling him deeper into trouble he wasn't ready for. She remembered his name the moment he barked it at her. Officer Grant. She'd heard it before. Whispers from internal affairs, complaints buried. Nothing proven, yet. But now she was seeing it for herself. Live, up close. And as he reached for his cuffs, still unaware of who he was putting his hands on, she glanced toward the nearby unmarked SUV that had been tailing her for protection. They hadn't stepped in yet, waiting for her signal. She hadn't given it. Not yet. Because she needed him to reveal everything. His words, his behavior, his intent. She needed proof. And he was giving it to her, second by second. The officer tightened his grip on her wrist, still barking orders like he was in charge. The crowd had grown now. Neighbors, early commuters, a few joggers stopping mid-stride. Phones were out, recording every word, every movement. But Officer Grant didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he didn't care. His focus was locked on her like she was a threat that needed to be handled. From across the street, a teenager named Malik stood frozen, holding his phone steady. He lived just a few houses down. His older brother had been stopped by the same cop a few months ago. No charges, no tickets, just the same aggression, the same disrespect. Malik knew what this was. Everyone watching did. But this time felt different. This woman wasn't scared. She wasn't rattled. It was like she was studying him, letting him make mistake after mistake. In the unmarked SUV nearby, Agent Brooks was growing anxious. He'd been assigned to protect her, even though she insisted on moving without a visible detail. She wanted to blend in, to walk like everyone else. But this wasn't supposed to happen. His hand hovered over the door handle. One word from her, and he'd step in. But still, she said nothing. Meanwhile, back at the precinct, an alert quietly pinged in the system. The officer had called in the stop, but when dispatch tried to run the plate, they hit a wall. Restricted. Clearance code popped up. Confused, they called the watch commander. Within minutes, internal phones lit up. Something wasn't adding up. But Officer Grant was still in the dark. The FBI director stayed silent, letting him finish the arrest procedure. She didn't resist. Her eyes scanned the crowd, noting every witness, every camera. She knew this moment would be reviewed, picked apart, and discussed at the highest levels. But she also knew something else. This wasn't just about her. It was about how many others had faced this same moment without backup, without cameras, without power. She was here now, but what about those who never got their voice heard? As the cuffs clicked shut around her wrists, she knew this story was no longer just personal. It was systemic, and it was far from over. The cuffs locked with a sharp snap, and for a split second, everything went silent. The FBI director didn't flinch. She didn't look at the officer. She looked past him, straight into the growing crowd. Her eyes met Malik's, then drifted to a woman across the street, holding a coffee cup mid-air, completely still. The moment had frozen time. Officer Grant finally seemed to sense something was off. Her calm didn't match the situation. Her silence wasn't fear, it was control. But instead of stepping back, he doubled down. He led her toward his patrol car with quick, forceful steps, ignoring the murmurs, the camera flashes, the discomfort settling over the bystanders. Back in the SUV, Agent Brooks had already alerted headquarters. His voice was low but urgent. "She's in cuffs. Local officer. Unaware of identity. Engaged with force. We need eyes on this now." He was told to stand by. They needed more footage, more evidence. They needed him to wait. Inside the precinct, the watch commander stared at the name on his screen. A direct line to the bureau was ringing. No one answered that number unless it was serious. He picked it up with shaky hands. The voice on the other end didn't yell. It simply asked, "Do you know who's just been arrested in your district?" The scene outside was growing hotter. People were stepping closer now. Some were asking questions. What'd she do? Why's she in cuffs? Is this legal? Officer Grant kept brushing them off. "Back up," he barked. She was resisting, but nobody saw any resistance. Only her standing still, speaking calmly, asking for a badge number and his name. He tried to open the squad car door, but it jammed for a second. That second was enough for her to finally speak. "You've made a career-ending mistake," she said quietly. Her voice didn't shake. It cut through the air like glass. He stared at her, confused but not yet panicked. Then the sirens started, not from his department. Black SUVs were pulling up fast. Doors swung open. Suited agents stepped out, moving with purpose. And for the first time, Officer Grant's confidence cracked. The crowd moved back, unsure of what was happening. And in the middle of it all, still in cuffs, she turned slowly, finally meeting his eyes. The moment everyone had been waiting for was seconds away. The black SUVs came to a hard stop. Their doors flew open, and federal agents stepped out in clean formation, no hesitation. They weren't shouting, but their presence alone shifted the entire mood. Bystanders backed away instinctively. Firms were still recording, but the atmosphere turned electric, like everyone knew something massive was about to unfold. Officer Grant stood frozen. His hand hovered near his holster, unsure whether to act tough or step aside. But it was too late to undo anything now. One of the agents, sharp-suited and stone-faced, walked straight past him, not even sparing a glance. He moved toward the woman in cuffs and spoke just loud enough for the cameras to catch it. "Director, are you hurt?" Grant's face drained of color. His lips parted like he wanted to speak, but no sound came. The agent didn't wait for a reply. He turned toward the officer with quiet fire in his voice. "Remove the cuffs, now." But the real twist hadn't hit yet. Just as Grant fumbled with the keys, trying to unlock the cuffs with shaking hands, a radio call buzzed from his belt. It was dispatch, and they didn't sound right. "All units be advised. Officer Grant is under internal investigation. Do not engage on his authority. Repeat, stand down." The crowd gasped. Even the agents paused. The FBI director raised an eyebrow, turning slightly. "I didn't know that part," she said, more to herself than anyone else. The agent beside her glanced toward the SUVs. "Ma'am, there's more." Another vehicle pulled up, this one not black but marked, not federal, local internal affairs. A woman in a navy blazer stepped out, carrying a thick file. She looked directly at Grant. "This isn't just about excessive force," she said. "There's a sealed complaint from 3 weeks ago, a whistleblower inside your own department." The FBI director was now uncuffed, rubbing her wrists slowly, eyes never leaving the officer. "You thought you were in control," she said quietly, "but you've been watched for a while." And just like that, what started as one act of bias exploded into something much deeper, an entire web of misconduct, cover-ups, and corruption. The street was no longer just a crime scene. It was the center of a storm that was only getting started. Officer Grant stood frozen, eyes darting between the FBI agents, the internal affairs officer, and the crowd that had now gone completely silent. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His hand, still holding the cuff key, trembled slightly. The woman from internal affairs stepped forward and handed a folder to the FBI director. "This," she said firmly, "confirms what we suspected. He's been altering reports, hiding civilian complaints, even targeting certain people during stops. We just didn't expect him to hand us the final piece himself." The FBI director flipped through the folder without a word. Her face didn't change, but the weight of the moment was clear. She finally looked up, and this time, her voice had a quiet authority that made everyone listen. "You judged me based on what you saw, not who I am. And now, everything you've done is going to be seen for exactly what it is." Agent Brooks stepped in, gently guiding her away from the center of the scene, as another agent read Officer Grant his rights. Cameras kept rolling. Malik, still standing across the street, lowered his phone slowly, a look of disbelief on his face. It wasn't just justice for today. It was justice for a pattern, for years of silence. As Officer Grant was led away in handcuffs, the same ones he just used minutes ago, the crowd began to murmur. Some clapping softly, others just shaking their heads in shock. The story that had started as a simple traffic stop had pulled back the curtain on something much larger: racial profiling, abuse of power, and a broken system that was now being exposed from the inside out. But just as the FBI director turned to leave, her phone buzzed. She answered quietly. Her face changed. Serious, focused. She nodded once and said, "I'm on my way." Hanging up, she looked to Agent Brooks. Another case just opened up, this time in DC higher up, deeper corruption. He blinked. "Worse than this?" She gave him a look that said everything. "Much worse." And just like that, she stepped back into the SUV. One battle closed, but the war far from over. The SUV pulled away from the scene, but the weight of what had just happened lingered in the air. People stood quietly, processing everything they had just witnessed. Malik lowered his phone and looked around at the others, some still recording, some whispering, but all watching history unfold on a street they'd walked 100 times before. It wasn't just about one bad cop anymore. It was about what power looks like when it's hidden in plain sight. It was about truth, finally rising to the surface. Back at the precinct, officers were scrambling. The name of the woman they'd just watched being arrested was now echoing through every hallway: FBI Director Jordan Miles. Some couldn't believe it. Others nodded like it made perfect sense. They had heard rumors of an undercover investigation, but no one expected it would start on their own block. Files were being pulled, investigations reopened. The badge didn't protect the wrong people anymore. Not today. For Malik, the video he captured would go viral in hours, not for views, but because it showed the moment justice stood its ground. The director didn't need to shout, she didn't need to fight. She let the truth speak louder. It was something Malik would never forget, and maybe something that would change how his community saw the system, even if just a little. As for Officer Brandt, his career ended before he even stepped into the federal vehicle waiting for him. But the bigger story had just begun. The director's quiet ride out of town wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a larger sweep, aimed at cleaning house where it mattered most. And while the cameras turned off and the streets returned to calm, one thing stayed clear: power doesn't always wear a uniform, and real justice moves with quiet purpose, even when no one's watching.